And now, the survival show that once survived playing a drinking game during the 2016 election. In this episode, we sit down with Tim Maynard, author of Southbound, a story of survival. His book explores what it might be like for a truck-driving survivalist if an EMP were to go off while away from home and his wife. It's a long walk home, kiddies. Howdy, and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 195. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Tim, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate you inviting me on your shows. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. I know we've connected a little bit, and I know you've been a listener for a while, and we're on the forum, and we really had the forum going a while back and everything like that. So it was exciting to see you release a book, and that's what we're going to talk about today is your book, Southbound, A Story of Survival. But of course, before we get into that, we want to know who you are. So tell us, how did you come to writing?
Well, believe it or not, it's through your show. And I was driving over the road. It's been about 3 years ago now. And I was driving over the road up and down the East Coast. And I was listening to your show late one night. And I heard your show with Glenn Tate and 299 Days. That really struck something into me. It struck a chord. And I thought, just when it hit me, I was like, I could really write a book. And it's something I've never done before.
Well, very cool. And so from there, you just started writing, or did you dream up the story? I mean, I imagine over the road, you've got quite a bit of time to kind of navel gaze and think through things.
Well, once I got in my mind that I was going to write a book, and was a step-by-step. It wasn't a huge blast, and I was going to write all this information about what I knew. Definitely, as I wrote, it created itself. But I did want to really put my life story in the book in a fictional platform. So, because I've had a fairly interesting life. I've been through several things in my life, and I always thought, people always found it interesting when I would tell stories. And so I thought I would put that in the book and then wrap it around a fictional story about an EMP. And since I was driving a truck at the time, I made that my basis of William, the main character. That's what he was doing. He's a truck driver, and I just went from there.
So now, we'll back up a little bit further here. How did you get into prepping?
Well, back in 2008, we had the crash here, the problems. This is something about it told me that I needed to be ready for something a little more serious. And that's basically what my prepping is based on, is job loss. We have hurricanes in Florida, which we just had. Mm-hmm. Problems in life generally, and to be prepared for it, and to be at least a little bit prepared for it. At least have your basics. Just be ready for anything that comes your way. And then it started getting a little more into EMPs and financial collapse and just being ready. And it just kind of grew from there.
Okay. So was it one thing in particular, or was it just kind of a collection of bad feelings?
Yeah, a collection of things. Nothing really struck me hard at any one thing. And I've always had a feel for it. I grew up this way with my grandparents that were always prepared, and my parents we were always traveling, so we were always ready, and we traveled all over the country. So I already had, and my dad and I would hunt and fish all the time. So it was natural for me to do this.
Okay. So now, again, you said this was your first book, which is really impressive because the writing's good. Usually first books are the ones that people write just to kind of get their first book out of the way. They put it in a drawer and never tell anybody they wrote it. So what was your writing background? Where did this happen for you? Was this something that you've always been a writer, or did you write a lot in high school, or what? Tell us more about your writing background.
Well, I appreciate your compliment there. The book, yes, like I say, it's my first book. I've never been a writer. I've written a small story in high school. So this book was challenging to write, but there was such a feeling in me to write this book that it just kept me going in a forward motion the whole time. Even though it was difficult for me to do, I really wanted to do it. And so I have no writing history, but the book just turned out great with the help of my wife and editors. We were able to actually bring it out and make it work.
You had said it was the 299 Days series that inspired you to write a book. Had you thought of writing a book in the past, or was it simply just that? Like all of a sudden you were like, oh, you know what? I've got a story in me.
That was it. When I was listening to Glenn Tate and you interviewing him a long time ago, it just came out. I don't know what it was. It was like, it was dark at night and driving down the highway and tires. It just hit me. And it just kept alive the whole time. It's like it was something I really needed to do. And there's nothing in the story that's going to wake anybody up or make something, anybody refocus their life or anything. It's just a story that I really enjoyed writing, but it's something about it that just kept me moving forward.
So what was the process like? Because that's you're driving over the road, you're driving a big truck, and obviously you're not sitting there pen and paper in the driver's seat, or hopefully not, and you're not typing away to the keyboard while you drive. What was that process like to actually get a book out while you're driving trucks?
It was a combination of using my phone for notes. I would suddenly come up with an idea. Once I started writing, I did start thinking about it and thinking ahead and think about what would happen in this situation and how you'd get out of it. So I would speak notes into my phone as I'm driving. And once I got to the truck stops, that's when I would sit down with actually pencil and paper and write. And it just kept flowing, and the story just kept developing on its own. And that's all it really was. And once I got to a point where I felt that this chapter was good, or this section of this chapter was good, I would record it onto a dictation application on my phone. So all I had to do was speak as I'm reading, and it would dictate everything. And then I would email that back to myself. And once I got home on the weekends, I would then start working on that section that I emailed myself. And it worked out real well for me.
Just $3 a month? Are you serious? Listeners, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of ITRH? Well, you should see what kind of love we give the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by going to itrh.net. You may be wondering what the Armada members get for their hard-earned money. How about access to every episode ever produced by In the Rabbit Hole? You might be wondering, how many episodes is that? Really? How many could it possibly be? Well, that's about 170 hours of long, deep conversations on preparedness. Can you dig it? You'll receive an invitation to the secret ITRH Armada Facebook group. Did you hear me? Secret. That means you don't know about it, I don't know about it, nobody knows about it. So you can chat about the sweet, sweet survival all night long, baby. And you know how much fun that is. Get a free copy of the book, Owning Your Survival. You'll put that preparedness thing under your spell. Go to itrh.net because you know what Nelly says, it's getting hot in here. Access the famous ITRH Bob and Emergency Kit on demand class. You know what to do with that bag, that perfect bag. You put it on her back. Oh yeah, that's nice right there, baby. You know how I like it. Ammo spreadsheets. Put your bullets in there, big boy. You know how to do it. Shh. Enough said. Monthly in-person and virtual online meetups. We've got to get together, honey badger. Ooh-wee. And that's just a little taste. You like that, don't you? You dirty, dirty boy. Go deeper down the rabbit hole and show that bunny some love. Visit itrh.net to help keep the show safe and sound. That keeps you safe and sound. Now back to you, big boy Aaron.
Did you have to do anything like to get yourself? I know a lot of writers that actually have to go through a very labor-intensive process of things to kind of get themselves into a writer's zone. Did you find that to be true, or was it just a constant situation of something in you was more painful to keep inside you than it was to get out?
There were times when I did have to push it a little bit, but sometimes I would make up for it by getting into a zone and work until like 1 o'clock in the morning, just constantly writing. And so it was kind of a give and take. And sometimes I didn't want to write at all. Sometimes it would just really come out and just keep working, and it just flowed real nicely.
Cool. So let's actually dive into the book. Walk us into it. What is Southbound? How does it start? Let's get into it.
Well, William, the main character, is a truck driver. He's based roughly on me. Any scars or limps that he might have are based off what I have and what I've lived through. He's driving through New York State, and then this EMP hits. He doesn't know what it is at first, but it starts off with him getting into a wreck because he can no longer control his truck. After a couple of days of really, figuring out what happened and getting it in his head that there's a serious problem going on, and he starts to understand that it probably was an EMP and that there's no return from that as far as we know. And so he decides to walk home, and he lives in North Florida. So it's going to be a long walk for him. And he does. That's when I explain what's in the truck, all the gear that he's carrying. I start to get in. Sometimes I get a little technical with everything that he has to explain to the reader, and actually to teach them in a way. This is also some teaching in this book, how to survive and how to prep and how to get ready for certain things. It's a little bit involved in this book. It's also teaching. So he gets up and decides to start walking. And it's not a couple of days after that he gets jumped for the first time. And that's when the story starts to get a little bit more interesting as it goes along. And he gets along, and I don't know how far you want me to go into it, but it's a long journey home.
Yeah, I mean, go as deep into it as you like, of course, without like ruining the book for anybody, but keep going.
Well, he makes his way across New York State all the way to the coast to Rhode Island. And a lot happens between that and Rhode Island, but his best friend, Thomas, lives in Rhode Island. And Thomas is based on my best friend that lives in Rhode Island. So I used him as well. So he's a sailor, but the character works his way there. And after a time, they end up sailing most of the way back down to Florida. Well, actually, I'm thinking they sail all the way to Florida with a little bit of adventure mixed in. He makes it to Florida after, I believe it was some 60 days. And blended into the story is his wife, who is trapped in Florida at the same time. And it goes back and forth what she had to live through without him being there. And even though she had all the preps that they needed, all the information was there, she really wasn't into it. So now, while he's gone, she starts to read all of his books and use all the preps that he had to survive. And with what's going on outside at the same time, it starts getting a little more dangerous as the weeks go by. And her story of how she survived without him, and they blend together in this book.
You said 60 days. How did you figure out the timing? And I ask this because it's something that I've noodled with on occasions, because there was a decent period of my life where I was traversing back and forth from LA to Houston, and then also from North Carolina to Houston. And of course, I'm a prepper, so I always thought like, oh, crap, if something happens while I'm stuck in either LA or North Carolina, how do I get back? How long does that take? What would I need to do to make sure that the people at home were at least well taken care of enough until I was able to get home? But it was always a tricky question that I would ask myself and try to figure out how long would it actually take me to get back. How did you figure that out?
It was a little bit tricky. I would have to do it in sections. How long would it take to get from New York State to, Rhode Island? And actually, what I did just for to make it easier for me, I would Google it or not Google it, but map quest it and ask them how long it would take to walk from here to there. And you get an idea. Then I would add like 5 days to that, or just from this town to this town, then I'd add several days to that. And as I'm writing, does that make sense to me? Does it make sense that this much time would take to get here? And if something really bad happened and it took 3 or 4 days off that estimated time, I had to do it in sections. You just have to kind of figure it out as you go along. Does it sound realistic? It takes this long to get from here to here, because this part of the country is hilly.
Mm-hmm.
lots of hills, lots of mountains. But William, in the book, took a train track through a majority of those mountains, which would cut the mountains in half. So he didn't have to go up and down.
Mm.
And sometimes he took a bicycle if he was lucky enough to have a bike. So that would cut the time, make the time different.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was done in sections, and you just kind of use a little, I don't know, common sense and just kind of figure it out what it made sense at the time. And you did have to do that as you went along. It was a process of figuring out how long it would take. And it took, in the book, just shy of, like, if I remember correctly, about just shy of 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, going back to the truck for a minute, that was actually pretty interesting. You said you detailed out quite a bit. And I know I get asked this question often, and it's not something I can easily answer. How did you figure out about what kind of gear to have in a truck and make those decisions? Because obviously you're dealing with much more limited space than, say, even somebody in an apartment or somebody in a home.
Well, for me, it's always been fun to build a bug out bag.
Yes.
So that's just a fun thing to do. And I have like 3 different types: one for my truck, one for my wife's car, one for just I carry around, one I keep under the bed. And so it took me, I've been doing that forever, just working with it and tweaking it and just having fun with it. So when it comes to truck driving, I do have more space. So I went ahead and made my truck bag larger and just formed it for, like, when I go drive up north, it's going to be cold sometimes. So I would pack for colder weather. And I just kept my basic stuff, your knife, your 3 types of fire starters, your basic clothing, all the little toys you want to bring along. And I pretty much detailed them in the book, what the character took. And that's what I had in my truck. When the character left his truck, he only had what I had in the truck. He couldn't have anything else. It wasn't like I just made it up so he would have something. It was actually what I had in my truck is what he had to start his journey with. It was kind of a rule of mine. Of course, he did pick up a few things along the way, but that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
For as far as driving over the road, it was just a little bit more than you'd carry in your car. And because you did have plenty of room, more water. I had a refrigerator and a microwave and so that kind of stuff, so I could stop along the way and heat up food. And so, but as far as the gear, it's just a little bit more than you carry in your truck, mostly.
Okay. How did your gear evolve over time in your truck?
You do get to know the road a little better and what you might need. But as far as my gear, it's just basically what I always carry with me. You don't need too much more. It's just what you can carry on your back and the things that are most important to have, which is just like your knife and your fire starters and maybe a pair of binoculars and just your basic survival gear is what I carried.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the reason I ask is a lot of us, our bug out bags evolve over time. In the beginning, yes, they tend to be just for example, some of them tend to be more tactical, and then over time they become less tactical.
Yes.
And things like that. Or as you pick up new skills, you go, oh, I don't need these 5 things because now I know how to do those 5 things with this one thing. So maybe you lighten the load a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. So did you write the book just to write a book, a cool story, or did you write the book to teach your survival lessons? Which way did that end up for you?
Well, I don't really know how it developed, to be honest, but I do know I wanted to put my life story out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good story, I think. But then I made the fictional story woven in with my real life story. And since I'm doing that, I might as well teach somebody something. So I'm naturally like that. I like to teach people survival skills. Not a whole lot of people really care about that stuff out there, but you can find some people who are interested in learning. But so I blended in my life story with a fictional EMP story and what I would think it would be like. And I tried to teach survival skills as I went along. If he was using a skill at that moment, I would get more into what he was doing to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So why an EMP?
Well, it's pretty much once it happens, that's it. It's all you, and so I just felt that was the best way to go. I'm really interested in EMPs, and I've always found it to be, once that happens, that's it. It's all over for a very long time. But yet people are still going to be alive. It's like where you have a sickness wipes, millions of people out. People are still going to be out there, and they have to deal with this EMP and deal with people around them. And so that's kind of, it felt right to write about the EMP.
What do you usually tell people about the book if you just meet them for the first time, or talking about it in social circles? How do you talk about the book and introduce the book to people?
I pretty much describe it like I just did, that it's my life story blended into a fictional survival story. And people have really found it to be interesting. Once they, I kind of surprised, to be honest, that people who have read it said once they start reading it, they can't put it down. Mm-hmm. So it's a smaller book. It's not huge. You can read it in I don't know, 6 hours if you was just nonstop. But that's basically about that, as long as it would take. But they say once I get into it, they just can't put it down. It's just a really interesting story to them. And that surprises me, and I'm really happy that it came out that way. I put a lot of time into it, and I learned a lot from this book about how to describe something, describe a feeling and what he's feeling at the time. I don't really do that. I've been keeping a journal since 2000, and it's only like a half-inch thick. I just write the basics. So what happened that week or what happened that trip is just the basics, just to let this remind me down the line what I did. Well, with this book, I had to get a little more into what he's actually going through and experiencing, and that was quite a challenge for me.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, cool. So moving on to the lightning round section, what is the best $100 you've ever spent in or on preparedness?
Well, I have to go with my boots. I got a really nice pair of boots from Germany, and it's probably the best pair of boots I've ever worn in my life, because I do have an issue with one of my legs in a wreck that I had back in the 90s driving over the road, which is in the book. I damaged one of my legs. It got severely nerve damage in one of my legs. So boots are really important to me to keep my foot to where I can actually walk decently. Mm-hmm. It keeps a good support. And so I have to go with a good pair of boots was my first good $100 bill.
So what are those boots for listeners?
They're a hiker. It's a good hiker boot made in Germany. I can't even pronounce the name for you, to be honest with you, but I could probably look it up and send it to you. But they're the best boots I've ever had. It's just something about them. They're really well made, very, very comfortable. I've gone through a lot of boots in my time, trying different types, and these boots just really work for me. We just did a trip, me and my wife, all across Europe. It had never had a problem. It was always great to put them back on. They're always comfortable. The next time you put them on, and they're really a really good pair of boots. And I think it's important if you're going to travel long distances that you definitely have a good pair.
That is solid advice. Speaking of advice, what is the best advice you've ever received? The best prepper advice you've ever received?
Well, it pretty much comes down to the way you think. To not stress out, to maintain calm, and if you're not calm and you're freaking out, you can't think about what you need to do, what's the right way of doing something. Of course, everybody's going to be scared, but if you really think ahead of time and prepare yourself mentally that you're going to be freaked out and that you need to be calm, that's probably going to have to be it. Just to remain calm and use your brain and do things smart as you can at the moment. That's probably a really good thing, something I was taught.
Solid advice. What's your go-to rifle or gun? It can be anything.
I'd have to go with probably the 12 gauge as far as all around. You can hunt, you can protect your home with it. You can use all kinds of different types of shells. I have to say the 12 gauge is probably my best shot. That's probably the one I would probably go to the first. That's probably. Yeah.
Do you have a make and model that's your baby?
Not necessarily. I do like the shorter barrels for more or less self-defense, but you can use it. In the book, it's funny. My character's wife is, of course, alone, and she does have this 12 gauge with her. And William loaded 3 shells with buckshot in it and 1 with a slug. Mm. So, if you have to, you can scare somebody away, but after a time, it comes down to it, you might have to blow them out of the water. So you have that slug in there. So she used that gun on a goose that was roaming around the backyard trying. So by the time she got around to shooting the goose, she'd already cocked the gun several times to scare people away. Just the sound of a shotgun going off,
right,
loading a shell, it scares people. So she had done that several times. So at the time that she finally got to wanting to shoot the goose, there was a slug ready to be fired, and she blew that goose into 1,000 little pieces. But so she didn't realize it.
That's funny. What can readers expect from you in the future?
Well, I am starting on a book following this one. It's where he and his group of friends here, his friends and his family, have to deal with the local FEMA camp and the local the Viper team in the area. They're going around house to house, pretty much causing havoc in the area. So that he gets together with the local militia groups and they develop a plan to eliminate these people. And after that, he starts running out of food. There's not a lot to hunt around here, so they have to make a plan on where they're going to go next. So the next book is heading west towards the Ozarks, where there's plenty of rivers and streams and plenty of wildlife. So that's what the next book is pretty much based on. So going to be a little bit darker than this one. Time is a little harder, and people are a little harder at times. So he deals with a lot of people as he goes along.
I gotcha. When do you expect to have that book out?
Be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not a quick writer. I don't write very fast, and I take my time with it. But this should be within a couple of years, probably.
Okay, cool. So, how can listeners connect with you?
Well, you can go to my book's website. It's WEA Page Turner. WEA stands for Whole Earth Adventures. That's my club, and so it's WEA PageTurner.com, and you can go there, and all the information you'll need to contact me is there. And there's the way you can buy the book, and there's I have some videos of our Whole Earth Adventures when I was younger. I have put together a montage of things that we did over a 15-year period, and hang gliding, snowmobiling, snowboarding, climbing, all that's on my video. It's just for fun, something I did. I used to edit videos, so that's something I did for myself way back a few years ago. So that's all there, and that's where you can find any information you need.
Awesome. Tell us the website one more time.
Yes, that's www.weapageturner.com.
Awesome, Tim. Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing your book with us, and wish you much success going forward with both this book and your next book.
I thank you so much, Aaron, for the opportunity. It was a blast.
Definitely. Show notes, links to today's guest, and other resources are available at intherabbithole.com/E195. Like Big Phil said, help keep the show safe and sound. Visit itrh.net to find out about membership benefits and how you can support the show. Again, visit itrh.net. With that, we wrap up episode number 195 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.